One thing I've noticed is that the top 8 or so running backs are averaging basically over 19 fantasy points per game, and then there's a big drop off. So we're going through the top 30 running back rankings today and expect those first 2 tiers to be really packed. And I'm doing everything I can to get us ready for week 9, so go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now, getting into our first tier, I kept it pretty exclusive because I wanted to make a point here by putting Jonathan Taylor at 1 and Christian McCaffrey at 2. So first of all, Jonathan Taylor is going up against a defense that is awful through the air. And I think there's this misconception that the Steelers actually have a good run defense. It's not good, and it doesn't matter because this team is abusing everybody. Their offense is the most efficient in the NFL at this point. Jonathan Taylor is having a actually special season right now. You've just got to ride the wave. And McCaffrey, I wanted to make a point here. I am not wavering off this one. I've seen a lot of people ask me, hey, should I trade him? Like, is it over? It's not over. That was a tough defense that he just played with the Houston Texans. Now, of course, it is concerning with the amount of injuries the 49ers have had, but the offensive line has been the same as it has been all year, which isn't very good. The bottom line is he just mostly gets 20 to 25 opportunities on a per game basis, and it's not going to just continue to happen. What happened to him last week? He plays the Giants, which is a much better matchup. I'm not wavering off of McCaffrey. Dropping down to our next tier. This is where the big one happens right here. I've got Derrick Henry at 3 and Bijan Robinson at 4. So Derrick Henry, this one's to make a point too. I believe that he gets back into this type of tier this week. And he already kind of did last week. He had 2 touchdowns on the ground, but he only averaged about 3 yards per carry last week. Now, that's the thing, is I've always been saying this. If you look at the Ravens' schedule, I called him a buy low because of it, and I also said he's a buy low because Lamar comes back, they get into more positive game scripts, and it's going to highlight what's so good about Henry, and I think that happens immediately upon Lamar's return against the Miami Dolphins on Thursday night. Bijan Robinson, at this point, man, like, I love Bijan. This is not a slight to Bijan. I have a huge problem with this Falcons offense. I mean, 2 games now, they've looked absolutely dysfunctional. The Carolina Panthers game and now against the Miami Dolphins. And I get it, Michael Penix wasn't there. Maybe he's back for this one. At New England, though, they're a smart defense that knows we just got to stop Bijan, man. But Bijan's obviously so great that you can't put him much lower than this. But I've got concerns with this offense more than I've got concerns, for example, with the 49ers offense. Jahmyr Gibbs is at 5 coming off the bye week, and Josh Jacobs is at 6. Jahmyr Gibbs, again, coming off the bye week. It really doesn't matter. I mean, Detroit's offense is so good. They're one of the best offenses in the entire league, and Jahmyr Gibbs is a big part of that. Now, I think the weekly concern is like who wins, right? David Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs. But even in David Montgomery's victories, Jahmyr Gibbs is still a good fantasy back. He's a high upside guy and a really high floor guy. Against the Vikings defense, I see it the same way. Josh Jacobs at 6 versus the Carolina Panthers. This is a beautiful matchup. And last week, I get it, the Steelers actually did pretty well of stopping Josh Jacobs, but they couldn't stop the pass. This week, it's probably in reverse, where the Panthers won't be able to stop Jacobs. And I do think there's a possibility Jacobs is not fully healthy, and that's a big reason why his efficiency has been low. But the bottom line remains this. When you're on an offense that's this good, and you get to the red zone that many times, you're going to score at least a touchdown a game, and that's what makes him such a safe play. James Cook is at 7, and Devon Achane's at 8. Now, I will say with James Cook, obviously he's coming off a massive game, and he's had a couple of these massive games this year too. Like, he always has that in his arsenal. And I will say this, the Bills are a much better team when he does that, because the Bills are actually 1-2 this year when James Cook rushes for less than 100 yards. This team needs him to do well. And if you think the Kansas City Chiefs don't know that, you're crazy, because Steve Spagnuolo is a great defensive coordinator who's well aware of how this team operates because he's been playing them for years. And I think that James Cook is actually in a little danger to bust this week, but of course, on this high upside of a matchup in this high upside of an offense, you cannot put him much lower than this. And then Devon Achane, truthfully, I didn't expect him to be this low in the rankings because I think he's going to have a good game. I've said this for weeks. Achane is the type of guy that has a really safe floor because he has consistent receiving involvement. In the Ravens matchup, I like it, especially on a Thursday night game. I don't know why he ended up this low, to be honest. I just think those other guys ahead of him have a combo of a higher ceiling and a safer floor. But Achane belongs in tier 2 because he's an elite type of guy as well. Javonte Williams to round out this tier at number 9 versus the Arizona Cardinals. Matchup is great. And realistically, guys, against all odds, and I will say that, Javonte Williams, he's become a really good player. Like, a really good player. This is the best we've seen Javonte look. And even last week against the Broncos, that was a bad matchup, and he got in the end zone twice. So even in his worst games, he still has that goal line upside, and the offense will get them there. And the Arizona matchup, I think, is a great one. It's in Dallas. It's on Monday night. The Cardinals aren't good. They're reeling. I think Javonte Williams is easily a tier 2 type of guy. Dropping down to our next tier, Kyren Williams is at 10, and DeAndre Swift is at 11. So Kyren Williams versus New Orleans coming off the bye week. The matchup is fantastic. The only real problem is he's not a tier 2 guy because he definitely has moments, plenty of them, where Blake Corum takes work away from Kyren Williams. And that's a problem because Kyren Williams is on an offense that's already pass first. So if he doesn't see the majority of the lion's share of the backfield, then that's a problem for him because his fantasy upside is really largely dependent on goal line carries. And he's been getting those taken away from him too. So I do worry about him a little bit, but I've still got him at 10 because the matchup is awesome. And then DeAndre Swift, against the fact that Kyle Monangai was involved last week again, I've still got him at 11 because I think that he is developing a really good system in this offense. Like, I think this offense, I've been saying for weeks now, they leave a lot on the table. They look dysfunctional still with Caleb, but this matchup against Cincinnati is, number 1, awesome. And number 2, the running game is getting it together. And that is Ben Johnson's baby. He loves that, and he wanted to develop that Detroit-style run game where Dave Montgomery is essentially Kyle Monangai. But I do think that Swift is still the higher upside back, and the way they're running the ball right now and getting him the ball in the passing game, I think he's a top 12 guy. Kamani Vidal is at 12, and Ashton Jeanty is at 13. It's a weird world where I'm putting Kamani Vidal over Ashton Jeanty, but that just shows you, at this point in the fantasy season, nobody is safe. It's all dependent on matchups and who's playing good. I hate to tell you guys this, he actually looked like a good player. Like, against a Minnesota defense, he ripped them to shreds. And he does the things that they want him to do really well, such as pass blocking too. They no longer have a reason to take him off the field unless it's a blowout. And this game will turn into a blowout, but not before Kamani Vidal rushes for a good amount of yardage and probably gets in the end zone on the Tennessee Titans as well. He's a top 12 play this week at the running back position. Ashton Jeanty at 13. Man, the Jags matchup, I think, actually does have some steam. The Raiders coming off the bye week, you just don't know what to expect. I mean, Geno Smith is going to be the starter in all likelihood again. Pete Carroll said they're going to come out and kind of embrace more of a youth movement moving forward. And Ashton Jeanty obviously is the centerpiece of the offense. And that's kind of the reason he stays inside the top 15, because Jeanty is on a bad team, yes, but he is still the focal point of the offense who will get 20 touches a game. So I do think that against the Jags, it could be a good one, but it's hard to predict that because they've been so bad. And then in the same matchup, I would rather play Jeanty over Etienne, while Etienne is probably in all likelihood in a more positive game script than Jeanty is. Against the Raiders, like, this should be a really good matchup for Etienne. I just have not been liking what I've been seeing from him. I think that he's been less efficient over the weeks. He hasn't looked as good on a per-touch basis, and they are giving the ball more to LaQuint Allen more. And I think that Bashul Tutin has always had a role, so if they give the ball to LaQuint Allen more, that just lowers Etienne's upside on a weekly basis. So I would personally rather play Jeanty over Etienne, but I'm really curious to see what the community thinks about this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto fsroundup.com, type in Ashton Jeanty, go to chat, then go to start a poll for week 9 and set him up against Travis Etienne. And I want you to vote on this one right now. Go let me know who you would play in this matchup because I'm really curious what the rest of the community thinks. It's completely free to vote. Completely free to start your own polls as well. So go to FS Roundup, start a couple start-sit polls, see what the community thinks in live action. And if you want access to my top 250 rankings on a weekly basis, that is behind the premium subscription on FS Roundup, which dropped from $8.88 a month to $6 per month last week. So this is a great deal. You're getting that in addition to the waiver wire tool. You're also getting the comparison features and the league sync up features, all for $6 a month. League winning tools. This is a crazy value that you need to hop on right now. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Rico Dowdle at 15 and J.K. Dobbins at 16. So with Rico Dowdle at the Green Bay Packers, this is a matchup that I don't like. But what I do like a lot, if you did not hear, is that Dave Canales essentially, without doing it specifically, named Rico Dowdle the number one running back. He basically came out and said, Chuba's meant a lot to the franchise. We really like him as a player, and we wanted to give him an opportunity after the injury to come in and show that he's still really good. But Rico Dowdle, we can no longer ignore it at this point. He's the better back. So that essentially means Rico Dowdle is going to take the reins here. Rico Dowdle, for that reason, for everything that he's done this year, the games that he's played in, he's done really, really well. So even in a bad matchup, I still like his upside in this game to a certain degree. J.K. Dobbins is 16. The matchup is brutal, and that's the reason he's ranked really low this week. I bet a lot of people were kind of wondering, where has he been? Well, he's at 16 this week because he's going to Houston to take on the Texans. That's a brutal matchup because I got to tell you this. Last week, when the Texans were favored versus the San Francisco 49ers, was really confused because I was like, this offense is a disgrace right now. How are they favored? It made sense to me watching that game. That team is really good at home, and that's a tough place to play. That defense is brutal. I think J.K. Dobbins could already split work with R.J. Harvey because the last couple of weeks have confirmed that's the way it's heading. And J.K. Dobbins, if he's not extremely efficient, probably is not going to have the greatest day. Jaylen Warren's at 17, and Tyrone Tracy Jr. is at 18. So Jaylen Warren gets to take on the Indianapolis Colts. I do think that the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is good enough to be able to keep up in this game maybe for a little bit. And Jaylen Warren last week, even though it wasn't a great fantasy day, still very efficient, and he still is the lead back. So I do think that there's still a good possibility that he has a couple of touches that are really big home run hits and maybe gets in the end zone this week. I do think that he's a solid play. Tyrone Tracy Jr. at 18 versus San Francisco. Opportunity is, of course, there with Cam Scatterbo out, unfortunately. I just don't know how I ultimately feel about this team now that Cam Scatterbo's out. I said this in the wide receiver rankings, man. I'm just concerned because Cam Scatterbo brought so much energy to this team, and they looked so deflated the moment that he left. And so even though opportunity is there, and Jackson Dart's been good to the point where I do think there's good fantasy assets, it is a matchup I like, but I have a lot of trouble just like ranking him gung-ho as a good RB2. I think he's a solid RB2 this week, but I just don't ultimately think that he has that much upside. Chase Brown's at 19 to round out this tier. They're taking on the Chicago Bears. Obviously, he has a good game last week, finally, because everybody's been struggling so hard with this play every week. I think the matchup is actually fine. Like the Bengals offense, as long as Flacco plays, and that's still up in the air, I think he has upside. But if he doesn't play, this is going to plummet like a rock. He will drop in rankings so fast, you won't even imagine how fast he drops. It's going to be crazy if he misses, but I do think that if Flacco plays, he does ultimately have good upside against the Bears. Dropping down to our next tier, David Montgomery's at 20, and Bam Knight is at 21. Now, David Montgomery, again, I do think that in the victories that Monty has over Jahmyr Gibbs, it is completely dependent on this point on if he gets a big run and if he gets a goal line carry, because Jahmyr Gibbs has taken a lot of goal line carries this year. Versus Minnesota, I just don't think that the Vikings defense will be able to hold the Lions offense for long enough to be able to compete. And therefore, it will become a positive game script to where Montgomery could have a lot of good work in this game. I'd rather take him over a lot of these guys that we're about to go through. Bam Knight, he has the backfield. I mean, they cut Michael Carter. Apparently, they brought him back. They're going to put him on. They're doing some gymnastics with their roster. Bam Knight, though, is clearly the lead back. Like, that has been the case for last several weeks, and it's going to be the case moving forward. At Dallas, the matchup is great. I just don't think their offense is very good. So I had trouble ranking him much higher than this because ultimately he's just at a disadvantage in Arizona's offense, and it's not going to get much better even if Kyler Murray gets back. Woody Marks is at 22, and Brashard Smith is at 23 to round out this tier. Woody Marks, first of all, versus Denver is a tough matchup. The matchup this week is definitely tougher than it was last week, and even last week, like, he wasn't great. But the one thing that I'll hold on to, and the reason I'm going to keep playing him over Chubb at this point, is because the snap count is actually favoring Woody Marks these days, and he's just better. Like, if their snaps are even and their opportunities are relatively similar, Woody Marks, with the receiving upside that he gets, is just flat out a better play than Nick Chubb. So versus Denver, even if he gets stifled on the ground, I would imagine he gets like 4 or 5 targets in this game, to the point where I think that he'll be good enough on those targets to get a top 30 finish. And then Brashard Smith at 23. It's here. It's here. Isaiah Pacheco left the game on Monday night. Looked fine after they tested his ACL, but it came back that he's week to week with an MCL sprain. So essentially, I'm projecting that he is out. And what I'm doing here is I'm projecting Brashard Smith is the lead back in a high upside game versus the Bills. I think Kareem Hunt will have a role. I am completely projecting this ranking right here because Kareem will have a role, especially in short yardage situations. But in the middle of the field, when they're trying to make a drive, put a drive together, get an explosive play, Brashard Smith's going to be that guy. And in this matchup, I believe that he has a great ceiling. 17-point ceiling, maybe 20, depending on how much work he gets and if he gets in the end zone. I think is a Brashard Smith's future, and I actually think that his floor is probably around 8 points in this game. Total projection here, but I like Brashard Smith this week. Dropping down to our next tier, Alvin Kamara is at 24, and Zach Charbonnet is at 25. So Alvin Kamara at 24 at the Los Angeles Rams. You know, I actually had somebody ask me, can I drop him? And I said, listen, I wouldn't, but it's really hard to continue to justify why you keep him. I mean, Kamara at this point, it's so bad that Devin Neal is starting to get receiving work as well. And I've always said this. If Alvin Kamara is not getting 10 targets a game, it's not going to work because he's not efficient enough these days, and the offense's upside is just ultimately not very high. So against the Rams, not a good matchup. I still keep him here only because he's actually last week, based on that week, the only guy that they trust to carry the ball. So for that reason, I've got him at 24. Zach Charbonnet at 25 at the Washington Commanders. Matchup doesn't bother me, and it's kind of become a point where after the bye week especially, if you look at the season and how it's gone, the Seahawks definitely have been favoring Charbonnet at the goal line. And that's what it comes down to because it's a true 50-50 split. So unless Kenneth gets an explosion and he gets like a 50-yard house call, Charbonnet is going to be the better play because he's always going to be in better position to get touchdowns on a weekly basis than Kenneth Walker is. So even though he's not the better back talent-wise and he's not the more efficient back, I'll take Charbonnet over Kenneth Walker. And I'll also take Aaron Jones over Kenneth Walker at 26 and 27 to round out the tier. Aaron Jones in this matchup, I actually think has a decent day. At Detroit, they're going to be down. Like I said, I don't think the Minnesota's offense can compete long enough for the defense to hold the Detroit Lions. I think eventually this dam breaks, and then the Lions are going to be up 21 points on the Vikings. And then at that point, Aaron Jones becomes a legitimate factor out of the backfield to catch a lot of passes. So I do think it's actually probably a better game again to play him over Jordan Mason, but I will reiterate this. I think Jordan Mason is going to be better for a lot more games than Aaron Jones is in fantasy football, but this is not one of them. And Kenneth Walker at 27 to round out the tier. I just said it, right? The guy is clearly the better back than Zach Charbonnet. It's not close. Like, he's the more efficient back, more explosive back, but unless he gets an explosion carry, it's just not going to be better. than Charbonnet in fantasy because Charbonnet gets the goal line work and Kenneth doesn't. So that's the problem ultimately, is that every single week it's the same story. Kenneth is behind Zach Charbonnet in red zone opportunities, and you can vet that at FS Roundup when you look at the RB usage pie charts. It's the same story every week. So I do worry about Kenneth Walker always from that perspective, but I do think that just because of his efficiency, and he still gets about 15 opportunities per game, he'll be a solid enough play to be a top 30 guy. Dropping down to our last tier, Ramondre Stevenson is at 28, and RJ Harvey is at 29. Now, with Ramondre, he's taking on the Atlanta Falcons, a team that I honestly don't know what to think. Like, Atlanta can come out and beat the Bills, right? They can come out and look really good, especially defensively. Then they come out and they get clobbered against the Panthers and the Dolphins. Like, this team is the most inconsistent team by far in the NFL. It's not close. So Ramondre Stevenson could have a good game if they end up pounding the Falcons, but he also could get stifled because it's not like he's done that good, and they are splitting the backfield. So it's not a clear good play, but it's also not a clear bad play. He has a ceiling that's about 20 points, but that floor is really, really low, and that's what makes me uncertain. RJ Harvey at 29 at the Houston Texans. I think that Houston, again, is a really tough matchup, but this could be a sneaky game for RJ Harvey again. He's getting more goal line usage and just being more involved on a more consistent basis in the offense. And I do also want to say this. The Broncos offense is looking so good lately to the point where I almost wonder if maybe they're matchup proof a little bit. Now, Vegas doesn't think so. If you look at the line on this one, Houston's favored again. It's actually weird. But I will say this, Denver's offense, the way they're running, the way they're using RJ Harvey, I think he's a top 30 guy at this point. And Bill Krosky lands at 30. And honestly, it's a shocker. I considered putting in Tyjae Spears over him, Kyle Monangai, Jordan Mason, Kareem Hunt, but I am ultimately stuck with Krosky because I do think that if Jaden is back, which is what I'm projecting, he could be a good play. I will not forget the ceiling game that he gave us, which was about 30 points in a full PPR format. That was a big game. But obviously, other than that, he's been a bad player, like a bad fantasy play and a complete disaster to play. So against Seattle's defense, I don't like the matchup, but the fact remains that Jaden plays, I do think he has upside. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receivers on the week, click on this video right here.